struggling single dad takes in pregnant teen left in the cold. Years later, she becomes his miracle. It was the kind of night that bit through layers, where breath turned to smoke and silence hung thick under the streetlights. Snow blanketed the sidewalks in a soft white hush. Dan Miller gripped the steering wheel of his rusty pickup, exhaustion etching deep lines into his face. He had just finished his third shift of the week at the auto shop, his hands still stained with oil and calluses hardened by time. Life hadn't been easy since his wife died 3 years ago, leaving him to raise their 6-year-old son, Max, alone. Every penny he earned was stretched thin: rent, food, Max's asthma medication. Still, Dan never complained. Not once. He had love. And even in the darkest moments, that had to count for something. As he turned onto the quiet suburban street leading to his small duplex, headlights caught movement on the curb. A figure huddled under a thin, tattered coat, curled against a bus bench. Dan squinted through the frost on his windshield. It wasn't just anyone, it was a girl. A teenager, maybe 16 or 17, and clearly pregnant. Her face was pale, lips blue from the cold, arms wrapped tightly around her swollen belly. Dan's first instinct was to keep driving. He had a child at home, bills to pay, and barely enough to offer. But something tugged at him. Maybe it was the way she looked, terrified and broken, like she had already been told too many times she wasn't worth saving. Or maybe it was because he saw a reflection of his own pain in her eyes. He pulled over. "Hey," he called, stepping out into the cold. "You all right?" She flinched and backed away as if expecting cruelty. I'm fine. Just waiting for the bus." "There's no bus at this hour," Dan replied gently, "and it's freezing. You can't stay out here." She looked down. "I have nowhere else." Dan paused. Every logical part of his brain screamed to walk away. But then he remembered what it was like to be helpless. And he remembered a promise he made to his late wife, that Max would grow up learning kindness, no matter how harsh the world became. "Listen," he said. "My place is a few blocks down. Warm bed, hot food. You can stay the night. No strings. Just, don't freeze out here." Her eyes welled. "Why would you help me?" Dan smiled, a tired but kind smile. "Because someone once helped me when they didn't have to." She hesitated, then nodded. That night, Dan laid out blankets on the couch and made her tea with the last of the honey. Max peeked out from his room, sleepy-eyed, and gave the girl a curious wave. She introduced herself as Jenna, 17, kicked out by her stepfather, abandoned by her boyfriend, and terrified of giving birth alone. Days turned into weeks. Dan didn't ask questions, didn't expect anything. He cooked extra food, bought prenatal vitamins with money he didn't really have, and drove her to checkups in the same truck that coughed each time it started. Jenna began to change. The shadows under her eyes faded, and she smiled more. She read to Max while Dan worked, taught him how to bake, and started humming lullabies when she thought no one was listening. The walls of Dan's home, once filled with the quiet ache of loss, began to echo with laughter again. But it wasn't all easy. One night, Dan came home late to find Jenna crying. The ultrasound had shown complications. The baby's heart wasn't strong. She blamed herself. "I can't do this," she whispered. "What if I lose her? What if she's all I have?" Dan sat beside her, his voice low and steady. "Then we'll face it together. You're not alone anymore." When Jenna went into labor, it was snowing again. Dan drove her to the hospital through a blizzard, hands clenched on the wheel, praying aloud. Hours later, she gave birth to a tiny girl with lungs that screamed defiance. They named her Hope. Time passed. Jenna found a part-time job, earned her GED, and helped around the house while Dan worked. She saved every dollar, determined to build a life for Hope. Dan refused to take rent. Your only job is to be the mother she needs, he'd say. That's enough. Eventually, Jenna moved into a small apartment nearby. But every Sunday, they'd have dinner together, Dan, Max, Jenna, and little Hope. It became tradition. Years flew by. Max grew tall, Hope learned to ride a bike in Dan's driveway, and Jenna enrolled in nursing school. Through every success, she credited Dan. Then came the diagnosis. Dan was coughing more. He shrugged it off at first, but Max noticed. So did Jenna. When the tests came back, it was lung cancer. Advanced. I don't have much time, Dan admitted one evening. His voice cracked. I just wanted you both to be okay. Jenna wept. You gave me a second chance at life. You gave Hope a future. I'm not letting you fight this alone. She put nursing school on hold to care for him. Max, now a teenager, stayed by his dad's side every moment. And Hope, sweet, 7-year-old Hope, drew pictures of Dan as a superhero, taping them to the hospital walls. Dan fought hard. But some battles aren't meant to be won. In his final week, lying in a hospice bed surrounded by those he loved, Dan looked at Jenna. I thought I was saving you that night, he said, voice barely a whisper. But it turns out, you were my miracle. Jenna held his hand, tears streaming. You saved me first. I just tried to return the favor. After his passing, the community came forward. People Dan had helped, neighbors he'd fixed cars for at no cost, single moms he'd quietly left groceries for, they all gathered. Jenna spoke at his memorial, telling the story of a broken girl on a cold night and the man who gave her shelter. Today, Jenna is a nurse, leading a foundation in Dan's name to support homeless teens and single parents. Max, inspired by his dad, wants to be a social worker. And Hope, Dan's granddaughter, talks about the man who taught her that true family isn't always by blood. It's by heart.